Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you. I am so excited about what's about to happen today. You guys, we have a guest that is coming on that has very much impacted me. And so I just reached out. They're a stranger, but I felt so impacted by them. I was like, please be on our podcast. And she is on today, and it is going to rock your world. I'm very, very excited to talk through that. But before we get to that, I have just a couple announcements. For those of you who don't know, we run a life consulting class called the Life Consulting Masterclass. It's a year-long program if you want to be a life consultant. And it combines a lot of different healing modalities that me and Justin teach together. We've kind of come up with our own conglomeration of healing practices. And so we've had lots of people be trained and love it. This year was our first year of running it as a school. It's been really fun, and we will be doing that again. So you can go, you can email lfa@stumblconsulting.com if you're interested in more information for that. We also will not be running Living Fully Alive this year again, but we will be running the Pathway to Freedom in, I think, August. And signups for that will be coming up very soon. That's me and Justin's course. Not me and Justin. Sorry, me and Pizzi. And it's about how your emotions are trying to heal you, not destroy you, if you know what they mean and what they're doing and how they're trying to get your attention and get through your life. So I'd love to have you guys join us for that. Me and Pizzi will be doing live stuff during that class. And then we also have something that we just started, which is doing giveaways. And I love it. We're doing $1,000 giveaways. So what you need to do is write out how you would want to give $1,000 to somebody, and write it in to lfa@stumblconsulting.com, or go to The Connected Life, actually, on our website, justinandabby.com, The Connected Life page. On that page, click podcast ideas that you want to submit and write in how you would want to give, who you want to give the money to, and how you'd want to do it. We want to see you dream with us for generosity this year for people. So I'm so excited about the guests that we have on this morning. It was, this is the first time I've ever just found someone on Instagram and reached out to them that I didn't know and asked them to be on our podcast. So new experience for everyone. But as I was scrolling one day, I found her videos about parenting, and they wrecked me. It is so much of what we believe and what we teach about how to help our emotions as adults. And when you actually see the way parenting could be done, it is remarkable. It is really, really incredible. I was saying to somebody that you can watch videos that logically impact you, that give you information that is logical. And she has great information. But when I watch her videos, I actually feel like this deep sense of healing. There's something about seeing what parenting can look like and imagining getting to experience that can be a part of reparenting our own stories. A lot of you have heard me. We did the Mother series about my journey of processing with my mom. And when I watch this woman, feel so much like this is the spirit animal of who my mom would have wanted to be as a parent and what she would have liked to be like. And so I've just like cried watching her Instagram videos. And so I just stalked her and was like, please come on our show. And so her name is Kelsey Brown. Kelsey, welcome to The Connected Life. Thank you so much for hanging out with a stranger for an hour.
Thank you so much for having me. And I actually didn't know that this was the first time that you just randomly reached out on Instagram. So that's kind of cool. Thanks for allowing me to be that first.
It means we actually really, really like you. It's the first time we've ever thought we're gonna hunt somebody.
I love it. Yeah. That's cool.
Well, Kelsey, we're just going to jump in. We're going to talk about some of the things I saw in the videos that I loved, but let's start with just a little bit about who you are. You're married, you're a mom. Give us just an overview of what your life looks like.
Yes, I am married. I am a mom of 3. I'm also a speech language pathologist, and I own my own business for home health with pediatrics.
Wow.
I also show up on social media, as you were mentioning.
Yep.
I often share a lot about highly sensitive children and what that looks like, especially how it impacts our life, and really particularly more of what you were speaking to, how we use positive parenting with our highly sensitive child.
Yeah, that's amazing. So how long have you been married for? Let's start there.
6 years.
Okay. And how'd you guys meet?
We met on Tinder.
Was he in your city?
He was, yes.
Okay. And what's the first thing that made you think you liked him?
Oh gosh. I think on our first date, well, he took me to an actual nice restaurant.
Love that.
Wasn't always the case with some Tinder guys. And he asked me so many questions about me that when I left the date, I was like, oh my gosh, did I just talk about myself the whole time? Did I ask him anything about him? And that's I feel amazing. Like it was just, it was a breath of fresh air. He was very easy to talk to. And I really liked it.
I remember that with Justin, he was the first guy that made me uncomfortable because I'm a really good question asker.
Yeah.
And so I had never had somebody turn it on me so much where I kind of lost my footing, where I was like, wait, I don't know what's happening. I'm talking the whole time. I don't even know how that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a love language. Showing interest.
Yes,
Surprise.
For sure. I'm a words of affirmation all the way, speaking of love languages. So it makes sense that I was so enamored by that. Of course, he's very handsome too. So
I love that. Okay, so how long did you guys date for?
So we dated for a year.
Okay, and then you guys got married.
Yep.
And then when did you start having kids? It could have been before you got married.
Yeah. So our oldest is 5.5. So I was pregnant on our wedding.
Wonderful. Were you morning sick or were you fine by then?
I was okay-ish. Yeah, I was okay. Yeah. I've never really loved pregnancy. It's not super good to me, but I was okay.
Yeah. So you have 3 kids. Why don't you tell us about each of those kids?
Yes. So, like I said, my oldest is 5.5 and he is our highly sensitive child.
So your first child was highly sensitive.
Yeah, to a T. So our other 2, we wonder sometimes. Our second is a girl and she is 3.5. We are wondering if she's maybe highly sensitive too, but in a very different way. And our youngest, who we also feel is highly sensitive, he is 1.5.
Okay. So you are busy.
Yes, very. And then myself, I am also a highly sensitive person, and my husband is as well.
Oh,
so it makes sense that we would have sensitive kids.
Okay, so why don't you describe, when did you learn you were a highly sensitive person? What does it look like having a highly sensitive child? Define and explain that a little bit.
Sure. So for myself, I would definitely say, that I've always been aware of sensory differences compared to other people. But I did not know about the term and the depth of the understanding of it until I had my first child, honestly. Because once I had him, I was like, okay, this is different than most babies I know. Because, I've been working with babies and kids through speech therapy. And of course, you understand and you learn in school all of the development and everything like that. And, having your own kid is completely different. And you're wondering all the things.
Totally.
So then of course I'm diving deeper. I'm also a forever learner. I could just, keep taking course after course. It's a
hobby,
almost to a fault. So I just kind of deep dived into it. And then of course, a lot of it was like, hindsight 2020, like, oh my gosh, as a child, I mean, to this day, my whole family will be like, do you remember how much you cried when your mom did your hair? Like, I mean, just all these random things. I don't know if y'all ever did this as kids, but we had like the firefighters bring these like smokehouses to our school. It was like a trailer with like a little log cabin on it.
Okay.
And we went in and they simulated a house fire. Like as, an elementary student, we're in this like simulated house fire and they tell you what to do, like get low to the ground, crawl to the door, feel the door, all these things. And I just remember every time it came, I cried and I always pretended that it was like the smoke was bothering my eyes, like, because no one else cried. And I was always like, oh, it's the smoke. My eyes are so sensitive. Like I would just, like try and play it off because I felt so dumb or like embarrassed. But I just remember thinking back that it was not the smoke. It was like, I was so like, in such a state of like being an empath. Like I was so being in like this state of like, it was partially maybe a little bit of fear, like of this happening to me in real life.
Yeah.
It was just this, like, it was more this like feeling of like, this happens to people.
Yeah.
Like people have to really live this in their house. Like, and it was just like this like strong emotional feeling. So anyways, long story short, my sensitivities were like, hindsight 2020. I'm like, oh yeah, I see all those flags.
I was always like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what were some of the things that you noticed with your first as a son, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So with him, some of it's hindsight also. Of course, when you're like a first parent, you're kind of like,
what is normal?
Out, like, yeah, is this in the realm of normal? Like what? He was a tough sleeper and he was so particular about how we got him to sleep. I mean, it had to be the same way, even down to like the movements. Like he didn't like a sway or a back and forth. He liked more of like a bounce with like a roundabout movement. Like, I mean, it was just so particular. And then funny enough, one of the really like obvious, so all of that, like, babies can be hard sleepers, babies can be fussy at night, all of that, we're kind of like, maybe normal. The one thing that like still stands out to us to this day is when we would make like a kissing sound, he would like I don't want to make it too loud because
go ahead.
recording, but more of like a like that, but like a drawn out like long kissing sound. If we did that sound, he would immediately burst out into like screaming tears. Obviously we didn't like keep putting him through that. Right. Like it was just so obvious, black and white, like us doing this results in him scream crying. Like he does not like this sound. Like it was a very obvious, which is like, I mean, most kids are not bothered by that kind of thing at all. Totally. Right? Like would try and grab your face or your mouth or whatever, like intrigued or interested at the sound, the new noise. And he was just so bothered by that. But it came, of course, there was more like the clothing sensitivities, food sensitivities, even temperature, like, he was more fussy if his room wasn't the right temperature to sleep and, stuff like that. So, yeah.
So, maybe some people who aren't aware of being highly sensitive would just think they're really picky.
Yeah, maybe. So, let me maybe like define it for you too. So being highly sensitive is like an actual inborn innate temperament. So I do think that sometimes there's, maybe two like levels. Either you're kind of passed off as just being like sensitive, picky. Yeah. Or the other side of it is people wonder, like, do you have sensory processing disorder? Do you have autism? Do you have OCD? Do you have ADHD? There's a lot of these like other diagnoses that people might kind of get confused with high sensitivity. So being highly sensitive is really, it's an actual increased sensitivity of the central nervous system. And so these, the researchers have found on magnetic resonance imaging that there's actual deeper cognitive processing that happens. And it's physical, it's social, and it's emotional stimuli. So it's all of the above.
So they can be impacted by the texture of their clothing. They can be impacted by the relationships happening around them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they can be a little bit more emotionally, like emotional ability, like meaning like highs and lows. So like or overreactivity, like so their reactions or emotional reactions can be bigger than their like, normal peers.
So kids who are already not knowing how to regulate their emotions, highly sensitive ones are having unregulated emotions that are even more extreme.
Right. Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
So
and it can be also to both external and internal stimuli. So external meaning like lights and sounds, or internal meaning like pain or hunger, thirst, things like that.
So they could have a huge reaction to being hungry.
Right.
Or thirsty.
So it's kind of like they go from 0 to 100 once they realize they're hungry. It's almost like you got to beat them to the punch. Like, you're probably getting hungry soon. Yeah.
Okay. So tell us about your journey of learning how to parent in that scenario and how did you grow up? How was your parenting with you being a highly sensitive kid?
So, I'm thinking about where my parents would fall in terms of their parenting style. I would say, my parents were, they did, do like spanking and stuff. And I think that was pretty normal for our generation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But I would say that they did significantly less than like other parents. So I do feel like they actually parented me pretty similarly to what I follow.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think my mom is potentially highly sensitive herself. And I think she saw that, she could understand. She's definitely empathetic. She's an empath person. So I think she definitely just could understand where I was coming from. And so, yeah, I feel like for the most part, they were fairly patient with me. I mean, at any point you do get kind of frustrated. Sure. Some of these parenting situations, but
100%.
Yeah, I feel like their parenting is not too far off from the way I parent.
I love that. That's really beautiful. It is really nice when you don't have to learn from scratch.
Yeah,
what
for sure.
Good parenting looks like. Okay, so tell us about. Go ahead.
Sorry, no, that's okay. So, I think that I was just gonna say, I think that kind of is where that like gut instinct comes a little bit. I mean, I do think that we're, in my I again love to learn. I do think that there's a lot of ways that I do things a little differently than my parents did, but I do think that the being understanding and having like that empathy in parenting is huge, and I think that I definitely kind of got that gut instinct from them. So yeah,
I love that. I love that so much. So you have your first child and he's very sensitive, and you go on a deep dive to learn about that. What are some of the things that you have seen from, like, what have you learned that has helped inform you?
Yeah. So, okay. So I get this question a lot. People always ask me, why are you an SLP, a speech pathologist, and not an OT, occupational therapist? Right. I get that question a lot because I talk about sensory. I even talk about sensory play and using it for your highly sensitive child. And so people are always like, what? Sensory speech?
Yes.
There. So I actually, in speech therapy, sometimes we're offered courses that are like directed for occupational therapists.
Cool.
And so that's kind of, I wanted to really, okay, let me back up a little bit. Of course, when my child was young and I was like, what's going on with all this, and started doing more research, I found out about high sensitivity or highly sensitive children and started reading more. But I myself wanted to be like, given my background as a speech pathologist, honestly, we don't really learn about high sensitivity in school. We learn about sensory processing disorder. We learn about autism. We learn about all the diagnoses.
The big ones.
But we don't hear really about high sensitivity, just a temperament, which, by the way, is in like 20% of the population. So it's not, it's 1 in 5 people are highly sensitive. It's not like an uncommon thing. So anyways, as I'm like going into more of this, I was like, well, let me, just take some of these courses that are offered or focused for OTs on sensory integration, sensory processing, things like that, because I wanted to make sure that I was really fully understanding all of these other diagnoses to kind of understand that, like, what is the difference, right? Like, what is the difference between being highly sensitive versus having sensory processing disorder? Because it's not huge, right? There's a small difference. So anyways, I kind of went into it that way. And then I kind of started getting interested in more like the psychology aspect of it. And lo and behold, as a speech pathologist, you can also take a lot of continuing education units in psychology.
Yeah.
So I just started taking all of these continuing education courses, which are really only offered to professionals. And typically, 9 out of 10 or even more, 99% of the people that are taking these courses are in their lane, right? A psychologist taking psychology courses, OT taking OT courses. But me having this interest, I was taking all these courses, and some of them I'd even reach out to them and be like, is it okay if I take this as a speech pathologist? And most of them didn't initially offer it, but they're like, yeah, that's cool because it applies to my profession too. So, so I was, allowed or offered all of these courses as well. So it's kind of where I've just expanded my understanding of this sensory processing, the sensory integration, and of course the psychology and neurology behind it too.
Yeah. Well, can we start with, there's so many questions I have, but let's start with regulation and dysregulation. Would you talk about what you have? Maybe you knew about that before you deep dived, or maybe that's something you've learned, but if you want to just kind of share about that part of the central nervous system and what you see and notice and your role in that as a parent.
Yeah. So, emotional regulation is really just, our ability to regulate or have control over our emotional state or our reactions to a situation or to stimuli. So, of course, dysregulation would be quite the opposite, is that we're just poorly regulated. We're unable to control our emotional reaction or what we feel to fall into a typical or a normal range. In terms of overreactivity, or what does that look like in particularly a highly sensitive kid, or what does that look like? Of course, that can be in terms of behavior, or outbursts, meltdowns, tantrums, crying, screaming, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
It can also show up though, even on a lesser level, just general fussiness, or even being inhibited, or cautious. Shy. Sometimes people describe it as being shy. But that can come from just, that dysregulated state. And their self mechanism to protect as well.
So kids, I would say all kids are struggling with figuring out regulation.
For sure. Yeah. They're not developmentally at the point of being able to regulate their own emotions independently.
Yeah. Whether they're sensitive or not.
Correct.
And I think this is one of the places where a lot of old school parenting was really expecting that kids should be able to regulate themselves and almost expecting that when they couldn't regulate themselves, it was disobedience. There's just an expectation of, why are you crying? Why are you fussing? Why are you whining? Why are I told you no, you should be fine. A lot of shoulds that adult. And the funny thing is, a lot of times adults wanted kids to act better than themselves.
Yes. I talk about that all the time. How can we expect a child to like behave better than we're behaving?
Yes. Like, so many parents are like yelling at their kids about yelling.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, you need to stop yelling. And they're like actually doing the thing to their kid that they don't want them to do, or even like the tone of voice that they talk to their kids. And then when their kid talks to their other kid in that tone, they're frustrated.
Right.
But so the concept of that, I think, is first revolutionary for people who've never heard or learned about emotional regulation, is just that kids can't do it on their own.
Yeah. And they need co-regulation, which is really the parent working with the child to understand or model, show them how to regulate their emotions. So part of that is just even like, part of that is the empathy piece, is just like showing our kids that empathy for their feelings and letting them have those feelings too, because I think that's part of the thing too, as adults who potentially had parents, adults who are like reparenting themselves, right? Because they had parents who were the authoritarian parents who, you know, were strict and just expected obedience, like you were saying. And now they're kind of falling in that same cycle of doing the same thing. I think you have to almost like reparent yourself. And sometimes, you know, particularly if people are in therapy, they're in therapy recognizing like, okay, I need to accept my emotions and understand my emotions and sit with my feelings and know that like this feeling I'm having is a feeling. It is okay to have this feeling. If this feeling doesn't define me, I can move on from this feeling. So I think like in thinking about like, you know, in the adult world, like we have to do this for ourselves.
Yes.
Like our kids need the same.
Absolutely.
Right. But they need it at like a developmentally appropriate level. And that might just mean like us understanding and hearing them, or even, I mean, sometimes we took a counseling course in college and grad school, and there's a technical term for this piece of like therapeutic advice. I can't think of it right now, but it's really where you're just like, you know, like, it's almost like sports casting back to them exactly what they're saying. Like they say like, I'm so mad. And like, all you do is you're just like, you are so mad, you know, like just a calm tone, just repeat exactly what they said. And it's like so validating. Like, you're like, yes, you're right. I am. It's like, I know you are because you just told me, but it's like, and that works for adults too. Your spouse.
Yes. Yes. And this is, I think, this is why I love it so much, because exactly what you said. In therapy, I had to go and learn how to figure out what feelings were, you know, like I could like years into helping people, I still was like, oh, I actually don't know when I feel sad that I'm feeling sad, or I actually don't know when I'm feeling confused that that's the emotion. Like I didn't know what my emotions, which ones were what. I didn't know when I was like, to me, I had like 3 things that I felt, and I just like threw them under big umbrellas, you know, like I knew when I was angry, or I knew when I was like feeling off. Those were like kind of the 2 things. And so a lot of, the beautiful thing about helping kids regulate is helping them learn what their emotions are, giving them space for those emotions, and then teaching them how to move through it. And so a lot of us didn't grow up with you're allowed to have emotions. So we also were never taught how to move through them. Yes. And a lot of our parents thought, and I think the intention was good here, I'm helping my kid learn how to not have their emotions control them. Like I don't want my kid to be crippled by their emotions in their life. So I'm going to tell them, get over it, so that they can learn how to get over it, instead of I'm going to help them learn how to get through it, which is then creating a roadmap. And so I work with, you know, me and Justin have worked with thousands of clients where we're actually having to teach people, like you said, how to feel and then move through it, not shove it down. Because when you try to just imagine the feeling isn't there, or try to run over it or dissociate from it, it will always pop back up. So do you have any examples just of like what co-regulating one of your kids would look like?
Yeah. So I think you mentioned, I wanted to touch really quickly.
Yeah.
You mentioned about helping our kids. You said, I have these 3 umbrella feelings. And I think part of co-regulation is that we have to talk to our kids outside of the big feelings. And I think that's where a lot of parents are maybe just uninformed or unaware. But I think a lot of parents, especially in the feelings, because it heightens our emotions too, right?
100%.
We also, when someone's screaming and crying or flailing or whatever they're doing,
yes. It's stressful.
Our body actually goes into, a fight, flight, or freeze state as well. And we have to, first and foremost, there's so much to this, but first and foremost, we have to understand how to get ourselves either out of that state successfully.
Yep.
So we're not responding in that state because it's not going to be pretty, or have to prevent ourselves from getting to that state using strategies on our own. So and that is part of co-regulation, because that is us showing and modeling how to do that to our kids because that's part of parenting. We have to calm ourselves before we can help them calm. And that also shows them that they're human, we're human. We all need these times and spaces for strategies and calming. But going back to what I was saying, I think a big piece of it, part of co-regulation, is helping kids understand their feelings and understand that there's more than just 3 words for the way they might be feeling. And that important work, that teaching, does not happen inside of a meltdown.
Nope.
If a kid's, mad and saying I'm mad, telling them well, maybe you're confused or frustrated. It's not a thing, right?
No.
So, just doing it outside, and that can look like a lot of different things.
What's one example of how you've taught your kids about emotions?
Yeah, I love pretend play for that. I don't think it can happen with anything, whatever they're my daughter loves Polly Pockets. My son loves Legos. My other son loves trains, and I do it just in play. And it doesn't have to be 30 minutes of pretend play.
Absolutely.
Pretend play is not really that fun for parents. Our mental state is so out of that. We've got a lot going on in our heads.
Yep.
It's hard to get to that, let me play pretend. It's really hard. I acknowledge that. It's not my favorite thing either.
Totally.
But it can happen in a 30-second clip. It can happen in a 5-minute stint. It does not need to be this. And it can happen a couple times throughout the day. But, you might be cooking and your kid brings you a Lego while you're making dinner. And they're look at the Lego I made. And you might take the Lego guy and do a little pretend play right there.
Could you give me an example of what you would do?
Yeah. So maybe there's 2 Lego people and they're arguing over something, and you might demonstrate, you might actually verbally say you're making me so angry. I'm so angry, or whatever word you might want to use to, learn a new vocabulary, feelings vocabulary, and then, problem solve through that. Demonstrate how to problem solve. The little Lego guy might say, I'm feeling angry. I'm going to take a deep breath. And then the other one might say well, maybe we can figure this out, how to share this. You can have a turn and then I'll take a turn. Okay. Thanks for letting me take a turn, and just going through this, jump yourself into this little kid atmosphere, right?
I love that.
What would a little kid want to say? What would you want your child saying to another child in a moment like that, right? So that example was kind of, a sharing moment. You want your kids to share, maybe.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think but what kind of feelings vocabulary can be implemented in those little nuggets of the day as well? It doesn't have to be printed worksheets, although it can be. I think there's some great feelings printed worksheets as well. But it can just be little pieces throughout the day. I think the most important part is that you're not only putting a name to a feeling, kind of describing what that looks like in a scenario, but then you're also problem solving, maybe using a strategy, not always, but you might be demonstrating a strategy to get out, to work through that feeling.
Yeah.
And then problem solving what you can do for the future or moving forward.
So that's great. I love that idea of implementing it through play and talking through that stuff. Tell me, what are some of the strategies that you use for you to stay regulated as a parent?
Well, I think first and foremost, like, again, the whole like making sure our bodies are in a regulated state for the day. Which that can look like a lot of different things to a lot of people. I think some people really like journaling. And, you know, some people are all about like starting their day before their kids to kind of get in the right mind frame. I'm like super realistic about the fact that like everyone is in a different season of life. Yes. And I think that season might be for me one day, but it's not right now. Because my kids are still waking up in the middle of the night, and I will take every second I can sleep. Yes. So most mornings my kids are waking me, and that does like, it's probably not putting me in like the best regulated state in the morning.
Sure.
But I think it's one of those things too, kind of goes back to like, you know, like we were talking about in therapy, starting to like better understand yourself and better to understand like your feelings. Mm-hmm. And your like sensitivities too. Like, what is it that's kind of like setting me off or making me feel annoyed or angry or frustrated? And in the like better planning for those moments, right? So like in the morning, my son, he will talk and talk and talk and talk. And I am like, I'm not the kind of person that wants to talk before coffee. I'm just not a morning person. So I am just very straightforward with him. I will tell him like, I love that you have so much to say. I'm happy for you to talk. I need to get my coffee before I have a lot to respond back with.
It's great.
And it's a respectful way of saying like, I don't really want to say anything to you right now.
Totally.
And I think our kids, you know, they deserve that respect too. Like I said, they're human and they deserve respect. Like, I'm not just going to tell him like, shut up, which sometimes is going through my mind like, oh, child.
Totally. Yes.
But, yeah, I think that's part of it. I think part of it is, you know, recognizing what we're sensitive to, what triggers us. The other part of it is, you know, finding, again, easier said than done, totally recognize that, finding nuggets of like me time. Mm-hmm. And I think like letting go of resentment over what like, or maybe not resentment's the right word, but maybe like your expectations, changing your expectations of what me time looks like. Cause I think there's like so much on social media that's like, don't let people make you think let you think a shower is me time. Like that's just a need. And I get that. Like I get that perspective. Like it is a need. We need to shower. Like that is a need. But
totally.
I think you can also like I firmly believe that like things are what you make them.
Yes.
And I think if you go into a shower feeling like I'm doing this for me to get some like rejuvenation, to kind of reset my mind, you're going to leave the shower feeling like rejuvenated and reset.
Absolutely.
Versus if you're going into the shower, like, finally I get a shower. It's about time anyone lets me shower. Right. You're not going to leave the shower. Like you're going to leave the shower feeling the same way. So I just think ignore all those things on social media and let your me time be whatever you want it to be. Like, if you don't want it to be your shower, then it doesn't have to be. Like, take 10 minutes after the kids go to bed. And I think that's another thing is like, it doesn't have to be like a 2-hour spa time. Like it can just be 10 minutes of journaling, 10 minutes of reading, you know, doing my nails, whatever. Like it can be little things here and there. I use an acupressure mat. I just posted about that on social media. I use an acupressure mat that helps with that for me. So I think it's just, there's a lot of different things to do in that time. So this is like the longest answer. I'm sure you're like, whoa, this is
it's great. It's great. It's practical.
So I think that's part of, you know, you asked the question was strategies for parents, right? Yes. I think that's a big part of it is like regulating our emotions, keeping ourselves in a regulated state. I like to use kind of this, like for both parents and kids, this like 0 to 100 analogy. Like we're all like complete emotional regulation, like a regulated state as at 100, right? And for if we're not meeting our needs through the day, or even recognizing the things that are like maybe causing a little like sensitivity to us, or things that, you know, are making us feel a different type of way, and we're not even recognizing those feelings, then our number is just going to keep dropping and keep dropping and keep dropping. And if we're a parent and we get to a 50, you know, this is just random number, right? But you know, if we're dropping and dropping and not meeting these needs, and we get to a 50 and our kid flips out, we're going to drop to 0 real quick.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
And we are to 100 at that point. So I think that's a big part of it.
So you're like, so the first thing is like, look for the little ways to keep your numbers not dropping all the time.
Right.
Like look for the little, and not like the huge, I need to go away for 3 days, but the like, what are little ways I can probably even acknowledging your own feelings as they're coming up, acknowledging what is going on inside of your own world, so that you're not just having everything build on each other.
Exactly. And some of that too is even just like, if you are like starting to notice like, okay, my kids are kind of getting on my nerves a little bit, like that piece of like recognizing your emotions, then in that moment, how can I build my numbers back up?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's just like putting down a firm boundary. Like, I am going to use the restroom right now. No one is allowed in the restroom with me. I am going to close the door and I will be back out in 1 minute. You know, like
totally
so taking those moments of time, like, those small nuggets to refuel that number back closer to 100. Because when the inevitable tantrums come, you want to be closer to 100
than 0.
Yes, exactly.
I actually really love that, because I think you can really do a lot of little things to help yourself, instead of waiting till you get to a 0 and then feeling overwhelmed with how to get back to 100.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's say that you, though, somehow during that day, you just gotten your numbers down and your kid is now throwing a fit and you are struggling with regulating yourself. What do you do?
Yeah. So I'll usually tell my kids that it is my job to keep us all safe.
Mm-hmm.
I am not feeling in a safe space and I need to go take space. And that's my go-to strategy, is I have to step away from them.
So good.
Of course, it's my job to keep them safe. So if they're not being safe, unfortunately, there are times where I'm feeling overwhelmed and they're not safe. I've got to put their needs before mine.
Right.
And get them safe. But most of the time, they're just like, you know, throwing a tantrum on the living room floor. And it's like, well, whatever, like you're going to be all right throwing a tantrum on the living room floor.
Totally.
And so that's usually where I'll go take a minute and I'll just walk away to another room, like the bathroom or the laundry room, and I will take several deep breaths. And what I try to like put in my mind is like, they are a good child having a hard time. Like it's a good person. He's just having a hard time. And then when I tell myself that, I start to realize okay, he's just a kid. Like, you know, like he's just a kid. Like he needs me to help him figure out how to get through this.
That's so good.
And particularly too, it's interesting because like I was saying, my daughter, we're questioning if she's highly sensitive, but she's really way further on the spectrum and doesn't have, you know, the emotional outbursts that my son does. And so sometimes it's interesting to, you know, she can quit, she'll scream cry too, because I mean she's 3.5. That's what 3.5-year-olds do,
right? Totally.
But she'll scream cry and then she'll almost within 30 seconds she's like, I just can't take a deep breath. I need help taking a deep breath. Which for highly sensitive kids, they can't it's hard for them to do that on their own. They can't. She's closer to neurotypical and she's telling me I need you to help me take a deep breath. So it is interesting to see that you know, the difference and, you know, what your kid could get to in terms of being the one requesting and understanding where they're at and that they need a deep breath.
Right.
And
it's so interesting because what you're talking about, I think most humans forget that we can be powerful. Like we teach, the pathway to freedom for our listeners. They know this, and living fully alive. And both of those courses are about learning how to, emotionally understand your emotions, what's going on in you. And we talk about, like, scientifically in your brain, if you walk away from a trigger for a few minutes, even if it's just 2, the blood flow from your emotional processing center can get back to your executive function. And so your brain can actually access things that you can't access in the moment of high emotions. Mm-hmm. And, but most people honestly live very powerless lives. Like, once you're in the situation, there isn't a way to just step away for 2 minutes. There isn't, like, people forget that you can actually just do what you said. And I think watching the videos I've watched of you, like, there's so much gentleness and kindness. It's not like a F you guys are idiots, I'm leaving for 2 minutes. It's definitely a, like, kind, I need, I'm going to go get me safe so I can come back. So your kids don't think, oh no, is she ever coming back? Or, oh no, now we're alone to feel our feelings. But there is also that thing of having total permission to do. I always think about being results oriented, which is like, most people can get rule oriented, which is, I have to follow this rule. I can never leave my kid in the middle of their emotions, or I should never sit with them in the emotion. And we get very, like, black and white instead of the nuanced mix of the best result will come when I am regulated and I can be with them regulated. And so what we have to do to get there might be different every time, or, like, not every time, but, like, it might not look the same always to regulate yourself. But if that's the end goal, then you can know how to take care of each situation, is to get regulated enough to be able to help calm them.
Yeah. And I think this first step in that too is, like, sitting, like, when you're taking that step away, maybe even processing, like, how your body felt leading up to that moment, because we can never learn to regulate ourselves or keep ourselves out of that emotional state, that fight, flight, freeze state. We can't keep ourselves out of there if we're not, like, recognizing and being in tune with our own body and what's leading us there. Because I think there's something to be said for, like, the ease of taking a minute and a few breaths before we fully get into that state. Because I think there's a lot of parents that are like, I can't even, like, get, like, I can't get away before I'm, releasing that emotion, before I'm yelling, before, like, I can't take myself out before I'm there. And I think that, like, that's learned because you have to, like, really, like, connect with your body. And I think that a good step of that is when you're taking that space, recognizing, like, there's a lot of, like, physiological changes in our body too, that, like, we can tune into, like, like, how did my heart feel? How did my arms feel? Or even when you're taking yourselves out of the space, meaning, like, being right in front of your child, like, taking a little break, I think you're still feeling some of those, like,
absolutely
feelings. And I think you can kind of tune into, like, what does that feel like for me?
Yeah. The more I've been able to recognize my body signs of dysregulation, because I will, so I shake a lot when I am dysregulated, but I never consciously think I'm dysregulated. Like, my whole life, people have been like, are you nervous? I'd be like, no. I feel fine. I just shake. That's just something I do. It took me till, like, a long time later to recognize there's something going on in my body. As soon as I recognize I'm shaking, then I can recognize something is going on where I'm just a little bit dysregulated. And now when I recognize that, I can do something about it. And even something just as conscious as, like, taking a few deep breaths, or, like, there's, like, little things that you can do when you're at that little level of noticing it. And I was thinking that the biggest thing for me when I realized what dysregulation and regulation feels like, for me, regulation feels like very, like, warm in my body, centered, relaxed, safe is like a term. Like the best way I think of when I think of regulation is like when I'm sitting on the couch and like maybe one of my friends is sitting there with her legs on me, and we're either talking or we're watching a show or something like that. And it's like a friend that I feel really, really, really safe to be me with. I often always get into a regulated state there. It's just like peaceful, loving, calm. I'm okay. And then recognizing my dysregulated state, which is when I have anxiety or have, and it can just be little things that start to, and I think what you're saying is so true. It can just start to build up your dysregulated state. And so you can do smaller corrections when you notice it quicker. Yeah.
Yes, I completely agree.
Okay. So one of the stories that I loved on your Instagram was you talking through, well, first of all, you film yourself. I'd like to start there because you film yourself parenting. Can you talk? I think it's genius for so many reasons. It is very brave because you actually see how you handled something with your kids, which is like really hard to watch. Justin has wanted us to record fights before, and it's like, oh, I don't want to see what I'm like when I'm dysregulated. But then the thing that really caught me that is so amazing is that your kids will have videos that include you playing with them. So not only will they see what they were like as kids, they'll see what you felt towards them as kids. And I think that that's so rare. So anyway, will you talk about recording parenting a little bit?
Yeah. So I have two sides of this. So one is I have a hashtag documenting mom. Mm-hmm. And it's all about recording like the everyday moments, but also the playtime. I record us dancing. I record us cooking or baking. I record us brushing our teeth. I record like all these different, just propping up my phone, recording it. I usually like trim it down to like some certain like cute moments or just even like everyday moments, just a little shorter. So it's not like a, 5-10 minute video in my phone taking up space. Totally. And then I save it into a folder, like a photos folder, album, I guess it's called, in my phone. And then we watch them back occasionally. Aww. Sometimes we don't. I mean, we just, put them in there. But sometimes we'll go back and we'll watch them back. And my kids love it. I love it because, I have things back to when my 5.5-year-old was like a baby. And I was like, I just propped up my phone when I read him a book and I, recorded me reading to him. And I think it's just really cool for both of us to look back at that. My son just thinks it's really cool to like see himself as a baby, of course. Totally. And I just think it's really special because first and foremost, like everyone says, they grow up too fast, Totally. So it's that aspect of it. But I also think, this is a little bit morbid, but I'm not going to be around forever. Yeah. And I think that I think that there's a lot of moms who maybe don't feel like super confident about themselves. And that's why they don't want to be in pictures and they don't record themselves. And I just think that one thing that has really come from this that I didn't even expect to come from this is when I watch back the videos, I'm like, I remember thinking when I recorded that video and I watched it, that I was like, oh, look at that. Like I was so hard on myself, but I look back at that and I don't see it at all. Like I look back at those videos and I'm like, look at like my postpartum belly, like look at, I almost look at some of those imperfections with like admiration, like, wow, like I did that. Like, that's insane, or even, sometimes like in looking back on it, I'm like, why did I think I was fat then?
Totally. Yes. Well, and even like what I would, my mom has dementia now. So there is a truth that there is going to come a time where you don't have access to your parents in the same way. And I would I've heard her stories for years about how she felt about me as a kid, but I would have loved to have seen it.
Yeah.
And like, there's so many videos that you've posted where your kids will actually get to see you enjoying them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
why I encourage like the everyday moments too, like cooking or brushing teeth, because I think that there's a lot to be, I think for me, I feel like I don't have a great memory in terms of like, I just feel like I look back to like my childhood and I'm like, why don't I remember more? Like, shouldn't I remember more? Anyways, I think there's a lot to be said that like when you watch these videos again, like they're building, they're building these associations. Like it's not true memory of like from the moment, but they're like their recall of it is more like they can talk about it, and just because they have all these videos to look back at. So I think that that's definitely a component of it too. But I was going to mention, so on the other end of the spectrum, and something that I've gotten some kind of hate for a little bit, is recording myself parenting in the difficult moments. And I think for me, I actually started doing this a long time ago before I ever started sharing it. And it took me a little while to decide if I wanted to share it, maybe because I was afraid people would be like, what are you doing?
Right.
But I did start to share it because I did feel like there was value.
Oh, huge.
In a couple ways, like people, first and foremost, knowing that they're not alone. Like, oh my God, my kid does that too. Like Instagram looks so perfect, and like people have kids that don't freak out. And so like just that validation that like, you're not alone. Like other people are going through this too. This is our version of normal also. So I think that's part of it. But I also think, that there's a lot of good learning opportunities in terms of like the things that I did right in the videos, but also in the things that I didn't do so great in the videos. And really that was the reason I started it, is because I was like, why am I getting dysregulated? Where is that breakdown happening? And I wanted to, kind of like what you're saying, recording yourself in an argument with your spouse. I wanted to see, where was I reaching that point? And trust me, I'm not perfect. In any sense, I still get dysregulated, and I'm still working on it too. So I think that's been helpful for me to be able to watch those videos, see like, did I say the right things? Did I do the right things? And not to be like hypercritical of myself either, because I don't necessarily want to like encourage that, but I just think that there's like learning moments in it. And
and I've seen videos that you've done, and I think this is one of the inspiring things about it in you, is you will go through the things you did right. And I think most parents don't do that.
Yeah.
Like most parents only see the things they did wrong.
Right.
Or want to avoid everything in general. But you'll go through, these are the things I did right that I feel proud of. And these are some of the things that I learned from, and that I can, you had an example that we could talk about on here, which is one of your son spit at you.
Yes.
So do you want to talk, and you caught it on film?
Yes.
So do you want to?
It was the first and only time he's ever done that too, which is the irony of it. Like, it was the only time he's ever done it. And, it wasn't because I did anything amazing or even damaging in that moment. Like, I didn't scream at him for spitting at me at all. And, it was because of the work, again, that we did outside of the meltdown. After that, it was the pretend play situations. It was just talking about it. And that video, it was actually more than a year ago now that I recorded the video, but I posted it more recently, or just recently. And I showed it to him before I shared it. I okayed with him if he was all right with me sharing that.
Yeah.
And of course he doesn't, can't fully grasp the magnitude of like, oh, this could be seen by 3 million people. Totally. Although he like loves that. He's like, wow, people, like, he thinks it's cool, but he's like okay with it. Like he actually, like, in watching it back, like, we were able to talk through that again.
Wow.
And I think both learned from it, and being so far removed from it too, over a year ago now, he was asking questions like, how old was I then? Like, why was I, doing that? Like, and he even saying like, things that he could have done in that moment and stuff like that. So I think that there's, some opportunity for problem solving through with some of the videos too, as long as your kid's like, developmentally ready for that, but also like maybe not like the next day,
right?
Like
totally,
giving a little bit of time, letting some healing happen between then.
And something I loved is, so you talked about what you did right. What was one of the things that tell me a few things you did right, and then a few things that you learned?
Yeah. So in that specific video, what I was doing was he wanted to go upstairs, and there's positive parenting, which I like to try to live by, and there's permissive parenting, which is appeasing or meeting like every request that they have in order to avoid these meltdowns.
Negative emotions.
Yeah. And in the moment,
this is honest. This is the first video that I saw was you explaining positive versus permissive and the balance of that, because we're so about balance.
Yeah.
And so you are explaining here the concept of meeting your children where they're at, but not letting them run over you. And that is such a refreshing thing. So go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Yeah. That keeping those firm boundaries, because I think there's something to be said that like every time, if it, you're just learning, the child is learning through example. Like if every time they start crying and you're like, okay, then let's do it, then they're just going to cry to do it. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, just keeping firm in your boundaries. I had already told him no to going upstairs. And there were so many comments about that, about why I didn't go upstairs. I felt like I never intended for it to be so mystic. I was like, I just didn't go upstairs, people.
Yeah, totally. There's times when you just need to be able to say no as a parent. Yeah.
I wasn't intending for so much mystery behind that video, but anyways, apparently it was. But yeah, so I think it's just a good learning opportunity for staying firm in that boundary and giving him the space to feel the feelings he was feeling.
So you said, no, we're not going upstairs. And he started having emotions.
Yeah, he was screaming and crying and pulling on me and trying to pull me to go upstairs. And to be honest, I don't even remember why I wasn't going upstairs. Sure. I just know that was the case because he was screaming it in the video when I'm watching it back. I'm pretty sure it was something with like the baby, my 1.5-year-old at the time, baby, and he was probably in the swing. I couldn't leave him in the swing with my at the time my 2-year-old, all the things. So anyway, in the moment I couldn't go upstairs, stayed firm in the boundary, and then I was empathetic to his feelings that he wanted to go upstairs. I acknowledged that we would be going upstairs. Like, I wasn't like, no, we're never going upstairs. Totally. I will go upstairs with you in like a little bit. And then, particularly, I think what went right was just staying calm and not adding a lot of words. Like I didn't, he was so to a point of like such dysregulation that I wasn't like throwing like logical words at him. Like I wasn't trying to like add any like discussion or conversation. It was just recognizing the way he was feeling, affirming that. And then the other thing I did right was I started taking deep breaths myself, doing like a breathing strategy. And I opened the floor for him to do it with me. In that video, I'm trying to remember if he did. I don't think he ever did the breathing strategy with me in that video, because ultimately what ended up happening is he was like pulling me and he pulled to the ground. And again, lots of comments thought that I was like restraining him, which he like pulled my arm. I was hugging him. I pulled my arm to the ground and actually like pulled my arm around him, which indicated to me like I need to be held. Like held.
Mm-hmm.
And, so that's when I like actually sat down to the floor and hugged him, and then added a little bit of like vestibular, like motion. So I added some rocking back and forth, holding him and rocking, and then was, rubbing his head too. And again, in all of this, like really not saying a lot, like just being quiet, being in the moment with him. So I think that's what went right.
Yes.
In terms of what went, like what I definitely could have done better. So before we got to the point of him pulling me down around him, before that, like when he was melting down and it dysregulated, he spit on me. And so one of the things, like right after he spit on me, I did not yell. I didn't I think it was actually when I was deep breathing is when he spit on me. And that's one thing with like highly sensitive kids and their overreactivity is they do sometimes get frustrated when you're suggesting like these strategies in the moment. And I wasn't asking him to do it. I was just doing it myself.
Right.
But that frustrated him. That's why he spit on me. And so in that moment, I mean, you're spit on. So
totally.
I'm starting to like get to this this fight, flight, or freeze moment in my mind. And I'm one of the first things I said is, why did you do that? And me knowing what I know, I'm like, why would I ask him why? He doesn't know why he did it. So
very rarely in a dysregulated state can anyone say why they did something. Yeah. They're normally just reacting.
Exactly. So, and then on top of that, I told him that it wasn't a kind choice. And so again, I mean, he wasn't actively making the choice. Like, I think it was just it was an overreaction. And, so I think that those were like some of the words that I chose in the moment are definitely things that like, I don't recommend to people. And looking back on it, something I learned, like, okay, that's like how I immediately reacted because of the way I was feeling. And that's something that I want to change and work on, and not like immediately put a why and put like a this was your choice, you made bad choices type of situation into it.
Yeah. And so then you actually made another video, which what I love is it's very proactive parenting. Like, what do I do practically it's not just like, how do I magically become regulated all the time? It's like, what do I practically do? So then you made a video of like what you could say if it happened again.
Yeah.
And you talked about in that video, like practicing saying things before they happen. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of like, key phrases or like, semantics. It's all in semantics, right? But I think there's a lot of like key phrases or words that I always like kind of go back to. And, I think there like part of that is like the routine of it, right? Like they understand, but I think also, part of it is a strategy for me to not get dysregulated. It's a strategy for me to, recognize the moment we're in and where it could lead and where I don't want it to lead.
Totally.
And how to stay in control of my own emotions by using these like, root words.
Yeah. And I think people think that that'll be robotic, but actually the more you've practiced something, the more you can say it with feeling.
Oh, for sure.
In the moment. Because when I'm trying to think about what to say when someone's dysregulated, like oftentimes, and we talk about this in the Pathway to Freedoms, when someone else is triggered around you, your natural protectors go off because anytime someone hurt you, they were probably triggered. So when you're around somebody who's dysregulated, it naturally feels unsafe. So your body is naturally going to start going into protection to help you be safe around an unsafe person. And so if you've practiced something and thought about it before, then it literally creates a safe pathway for you to get to a way in your mind that you know what to do. Because most of the time when when our body starts telling us you're not safe. And it's funny that you can be around a 2-year-old throwing a fit and your body will tell you that's not safe.
Yes.
It's not a logical, like they can't harm you physically. It's not that you're scared of them like beating you up, but there is this feels out of control. It can instantly remind you of a million situations where you're around people who had erratic emotions. And so when you have a place in your mind that you can go that will provide safety to both you, it's very, very helpful. So what are a few of the phrases that you use a lot in your parenting?
Definitely that like sportscasting. So just saying back what I'm hearing them say. Definitely always saying, I'm here to keep you safe. I'm here to keep us safe. I'm not going anywhere. I'm here when you're ready. Things like that, like letting them know that like you're always there for them. Especially if you're taking like space, you know, I'm here to keep us safe. I need a minute. I will be back. Particularly letting them know that I know they are a good person having a hard time.
It's really good.
And so just always, you know, and not necessarily in the moment, but definitely like after, like when we're like talking through something that happened, I think, you know, like you are a good child. You are just having a really hard time.
Oh, so beautiful.
Yeah. Cause I think it's important that, again, going back to the whole, like things are what you make them. I think, you know, if we are repeatedly like only saying like, you're so like, yes, you're angry, or yes, you're frustrated. You know, if we're only repeating those words back to them, like that is going to be their mantra, right? Like, I'm a frustrated, angry person. So I think like going back to like making sure we're affirming the things that are going right. So like, you're a kind person, you're, you know, things like that. And just affirming that, like, and modeling too, modeling apologies, I think is huge. It's a little off topic, sorry, but I think, it goes in with, you know, we want them. I was thinking of the spitting incident again. Like if I want him to apologize to me for spitting, like he needs to see what an apology looks like. So
good.
Yeah.
I love that.
I'm trying to think if I have any other off the top of my head. Oh, one thing that I say all the time, this isn't really for like moments of like huge dysregulation. This is more like when my kids come to me and are whining at me, like he took this from me, or I'm hungry, or, you know, all the things. I often say, like, I can hear you need something, but I need you to use clear, strong words. Or like, I am hearing whining right now. I'm ready to listen to clear, strong words. Those words come out of my mouth like
500 times a day.
Yes. When I die, my kids are probably going to like use that in their eulogy. Like, my mom loved clear, strong words.
That's hysterical. Yeah. I think one of the things, for our listeners, I love it. If you have Instagram, I would highly recommend looking at Kelsey's, following her, because watching her in the moment is truly remarkable. Seeing what it's like. I mean, she's very articulate, and I learn best from seeing real life examples. I think that's why I was so moved by seeing you have video recorded tantrums with your kids. I'm like, that feels like the missing link in all the parenting teachings that I've been a part of. I'm like, this sounds great, but I want to see how it actually is implemented in a moment. And so you can actually see that in Kelsey's, but you can also hear, like, I feel like if you just watch your content regularly, you can start to hear the words. If you have no idea where to start as a parent or what things to say are helpful or not helpful, even like in the video where she broke down talking through the good things she said and the bad things she said, not bad things, but the things she would have changed. She brought up that concept of like, I don't want to call my kids good or bad. I want them to you want to call them good. I don't want to call my kids bad for something that happens. And it like brought up a whole other concept of parenting from the belief that your kids are good and they're going through hard things. They don't know how to communicate the pain they're in, or there's something going on inside of them. Even that concept is a revolutionary concept. I mean, I know that I grew up in a religious home, and so a lot of the concept was we are innately bad and we are disciplining to get the badness out of you, which is not a helpful concept. It teaches a lot of shame, and behavior follows our belief about our identity. We have a better chance of behaving in ways that are productive towards society when we believe that there's good in us.
Yeah.
But anyway, all of that, you can actually see it in motion in her videos. You can hear her voice. It's remarkable to see, honestly, the way she stays calm while her kids are throwing fits are remarkable. Watching her son like actually melt down, and then all the way to you being on the floor with him, holding him until he gets to a place of kind of releasing into it. It's really healing to watch, to see what love, because I think honestly, a lot of mental illness, I don't want to say one part of mental illness, I think is actually just dysregulation that never got taught how to be regulated, trauma that creates dysregulation patterns. And so in working with lots of people, we've seen the more they have experienced external regulation from people, the safer they have felt, the more their mindsets change and their habits change. And so it's beautiful. I recommend watching it, even if it's just for your own soul, to see and feel what it could be. What is your Instagram handle?
Yeah, it's as the littles grow, but with underscores. So as underscore the underscore littles underscore grow. I had to make it difficult.
That's great.
But yes, I do think, kind of going off of what you said, one of the reasons of posting some of these videos, which, like I said, I didn't for a while and wondered if I should, but I think what brought me to doing it is that, if I'm speaking and saying like what to do, I think it's important for people to not, like you said, like be able to see it in real time, but also to start or continue, not start, to continue removing that stigma and continue, like, if I'm going to say, like, you need to recognize that all feelings are okay, then why am I not posting sad, frustrated feelings? If all feelings are okay, then it should be okay to post these feelings.
Yes.
So I think that's part of it. Not only the part of like, parents knowing that they're not alone with their kids in these feelings, but also like knowing that like, it's okay for your kids to have these feelings. Like you're not alone. And it's also like, okay, like it is okay that your child has a hard time regulating their emotions. Here's what we're going to do now.
Yes.
Because I think, I think that there's a whole other, we could do a whole podcast on like the amazingness of highly sensitive kids and, all of the really cool attributes that come with it and why like our like society as a whole, like needs sensitive people in order to, function.
Yes.
So I think that that's part of my Instagram is not just, it's about sharing these hard moments and what to do in these hard moments, but it's also like recognizing that like the hard moments exist. It's okay that they exist. Let's figure out like, let's problem solve out of it or like through it, like we were saying, but also like, what is the really like awesome part of having these sensitive kids too. So I kind of have like both ends of that.
I want to, I know we have to wrap up soon, but do you want to give just a couple reasons for people listening about, because we talked about a few ways to notice highly sensitive kids. Do you want to give just a couple things that you love or why you feel like highly sensitive people are so valuable on the planet?
Yeah. I know I talked a little bit about, the empathy, but highly sensitive people are definitely most often empathetic. A lot of these sensitive kiddos are very wise beyond their years. They have really big vocabularies. they're very intuitive and in like cautiousness, but their cautiousness is for reason, right? Like the researchers behind this, this actually exists in like over 100 species. And one thing that they talk about is like when there's deer next to the road, there's always a deer that's going to bolt right across the street. And there's always like often that highly sensitive deer who's on the side of the street looking both ways and making sure before they cross. And but also like the animals that the highly sensitive people and animals are often, more aware of their surroundings, and that helps in nature to be aware of your surroundings and predators and whatever. So highly sensitive kids, though, they're also like super creative and just really, cognitively, their cognitive processing is just so deep. So it's really cool to see some of that play out in their childhood.
I love that. Yeah, you did a story about a drawing that your son made versus your daughter made, and like the amount of meaning he attached to every part of his drawing. And then your daughter's was just like, this is you. Okay, bye.
Yes.
Very cute. I think one of the reasons that I think my mom was definitely a very highly sensitive. What do you call it?
Highly sensitive person.
Yeah, a highly sensitive person. And so I think one of the things that I loved so much, she was highly sensitive, but didn't know how to regulate. So she had lots of empathy, but also like was just all over the place and wasn't able to regulate me because she was so sensitive that if I was unregulated, it unregulated her. She overly felt my emotions and then got lost in them. And then I had to figure out how to get us both out. And so it was really beautiful seeing, like, I don't feel like what you have done is created a label that allows for victimization inside of it. It's like, you're a highly sensitive person, but you are still learning how to show up the best to regulate your kids. It's not an excuse to not regulate. It's just an understanding of why you're getting there and what's going on inside of you.
Definitely.
And I think that I loved that. And I look back at my childhood and just trying to help our listeners. Like, I look back and I think the biggest pain points I had was dysregulation and not knowing how to get regulated. I had a lot of emotional outbursts as a kid that I think was trying to get out all the stuff going on inside. And I, have now been married for 14 years. And my husband has learned a lot more about regulation, external regulation. And so he's a great partner in learning co-regulation. But I mean, I'm 38 and having to learn, having to relearn regulation has been a journey for me. And so I just think it's so beautiful and powerful for somebody to learn who they are, have that self-awareness, like you recognizing when in my body, when in my emotions, what's going on inside of me. Self-awareness really, really impacts the world. Because you can really make great decisions. So I love the content you have. I think we could have 20 more conversations about children. There's so many. We covered a broad span today, but I just want to thank you so much for being on here. And I just think you are so brave. It is very brave to open up your life on such a vulnerable way to the public. And it's something that drew me to you because I was like, oh, she cares about authenticity. She's not trying to look like an expert. That's instantly what made me trust you. Because I'm like, there's no expert that actually does this stuff all the time. Because people think I'm an expert in all my fields. And I'm like, I'm still figuring it out. And so I loved you showing the messy and the good and having such a shame-free. You have such a learner mentality. And if parents could grab that instead of I'm a bad parent because I didn't do it right, or I'm a good parent because I did everything right, that mentality of like, I'm learning.
Yes.
That learner mentality you have is massively shutting down shame. So thank you so much for sharing your life, in such a way that breaks shame and empowers other people. And if we could all take care of our kids and teach them how to regulate, the world would be a much more empathetic, kind, safe place for everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for your kind words and encouragement. It really means a lot.
All right. Well, I'm so thankful that she shared so much of what we talked about today about regulating and understanding what's going on in your body, and self-awareness is what the course, The Pathway to Freedom, is about. It's literally a course on triggers, understanding all of the parts of like what's going on in your mind, what's going on in your body, how to begin that process of working through triggers, how triggers can help you and not hurt you. And so we're about to do signups for that. If you are interested in taking that course, go ahead and email us lfa@stumvalconsulting.com. That's lfa@stumvalconsulting.com. The Pathway to Freedom will be very beneficial to get you on the journey of learning how to begin regulation and safe connection. So, all right. Thanks so much. If you got anything out of this parenting episode, please share it, like it, review it, subscribe. I don't know what all the things are. Justin always gives the spiel, but thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for sharing things with people that you know and love. We love getting to be in your worlds, and have a good day.